The air in front of the Parliament building in Jakarta was thick with smoke and shouting. The air in front of the Parliament building in Jakarta was thick with smoke and shouting. The air in front of the Parliament building in Jakarta was thick with smoke and shouting. It was a Tuesday, but the usual city traffic had been replaced by a massive crowd. Thousands of young people had flooded the streets. Thousands of young people had flooded the streets. They carried handmade signs with bold, sometimes humorous messages. Their voices joined together in songs of protest, echoing between tall buildings. Their voices joined together in songs of protest, echoing between tall buildings. This was not just a gathering, it was a powerful statement from a generation. The energy was a mix of anger, hope, and a deep-seated frustration. I remember watching a young woman with a megaphone, her voice hoarse but steady. I remember watching a young woman with a megaphone, her voice hoarse but steady. It represented a deep crack in the trust between the people and those in power. So what exactly pushed these thousands of people onto the streets? The immediate trigger was a set of proposed laws that caused widespread alarm. One of the most controversial was a revision to the criminal code known as the RKUHP. This bill contained articles that many felt were a step backward for personal freedom. It included provisions that could punish criticism of the president. It included provisions that could outlaw sex outside of marriage. It included provisions that could restrict the rights of women and minority groups. People saw these proposed rules not as a way to maintain order, but as a way for the state to intrude into their private lives and control their freedom of expression. Another significant spark was the weakening of the Corruption Eradication Commission, or KPK. For years, the KPK was seen as one of Indonesia's most trusted institutions. However, a new law was passed that changed the status of its employees and placed it under greater government oversight. To many Indonesians, this move looked like an attempt to weaken the commission and protect powerful figures. Beyond the specific laws, there was a growing sense of democratic decline. What made these protests so remarkable was who was leading them. This was largely a movement driven by the youth, university students, organized under alliances like the All Indonesia Students Executive Body, BMSI. They were the organizers, they were the speakers. They grew up with the internet and social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, to coordinate actions, to spread information, to bypass mainstream narratives. But it wasn't just university students. High school and vocational students joined in massive numbers. They found common cause with workers over labor rights and the omnibus law. Politically aware, digitally connected, less willing to accept old politics, they can mobilize quickly nationwide. The government's response to this massive wave of protests has been mixed, and at times contradictory. Initially, officials tried to downplay the scale of discontent. They dismissed protesters as misinformed, or as manipulated by unseen political actors aiming to create chaos. President Joko Widodo's administration defended controversial laws as necessary for reform and growth. That initial dismissal failed to acknowledge real, widespread concerns, fueling more anger and frustration among demonstrators who felt unheard. As protests grew larger and more persistent, the government's stance began to shift. Under public pressure, the president announced a delay in passing the controversial criminal code bill to allow for dialogue. But for other laws, the government pushed forward despite fierce opposition. Law weakening the KPK, the omnibus law on job creation. Heavy-handed police responses continued, making clear that dissent could be met with force. These protests place Indonesia at a critical crossroads, revealing a deep divide between the ruling elite and a large segment of the population, especially the youth. Will the government choose dialogue, inclusivity, reform, or will it close civic space and prioritize elite interests?